Regarding the salt and the wood that Beis Din instituted, that the Kohanim may make use of them. Regarding the red cow, they instituted that the ashes be exempt from the laws of the Me'ilah. And regarding replacement for the disqualified bird offerings, so that they should come from the public treasury. Rav Yossi says the one who supplies the birds must supply replacements for the disqualified ones. All spittle that is found in Yerushalayim is assumed to be tahor, except for that found in the upper market. These are the words of Reb Meir. Reb Yossi says at other times of the year, whatever spittle is in the middle of the street is assumed to be tameh, and whatever is on the sides is tahor. But at the time of the pilgrimage festival, whenever spittle is in the middle of the street is assumed to be tahor, and whatever is on the sides is tameh, because since they are a minority, they withdraw to the sides. All the utensils that are found in Jerusalem on the path leading down to the mikvah are assumed to be tameh, but those found on the path leading up from the mikvah are assumed to be tahor. For the path of the descent is not the path of the ascent. These are the words of Reb Meir. Reb Yossi says all are assumed to be tahor except for the basket, the shovel, and the spade that are reserved for grave sites.
Okay. So having accepted that Rabbi Yossi's opinion is the halacha, Mishnah Gimel starts with that presumption that everything is assumed to be tahor. However, sakin. The shchita knife, and it was found on the 14th. Okay. Now, in this particular case, even Rabbi Yossi is machmir on the. Let me just read. I'm just going to read the Kahati's introduction to this Mishnah. So after we've learned in the previous Mishnah that if Kalim were found in Yerushalayim, they are assumed to be tahor, according to Rabbi Yossi, which was the halacha. But this Mishnah comes to teach us that for kodshim, we're still more machmir to require things to have tevila, as we'll see in the Mishnah. So we're not. So for general kalim, where we're like concerned, can you eat it with things, and will it make them tameh, and will it make you tameh, etc. So there we're very makel. But when it comes to kodshim, particularly for things like the korban pesach, there we're going to be machmir about it. Okay, so the knife, however, if the knife was found lying around on the 14th, shochet b'miyad, you don't need to take it to mikveh. It's assumed that everyone tovels the shchita knives on the 14th because everyone's doing a shchita that day. Remember, the shchita is the one part of the avodah that can be done by Yisraelim, and therefore it should be done by Yisraelim because the Kohanim have got their hands full already. Thank you very much. So if you've got somebody in your chabura who's having, you've got whatever 20 people in your group, the person who should take it to the mikdash is somebody who can do shchita. Okay. B'shlosha asar, what happens if you find the knife on the 13th of Nisan? Shonu matbil. So here you have to be machmir. You can't assume that it's ready. You have to tovel it on the 13th so that it can have harav shemesh. And it'll be ready for shchita on the 14th. Okay, the kofetz. Now this is a meat cleaver. This is usually used for chopping meat, but if it's the sharp enough and it's got a smooth blade, then you can use it for shchita as well. However, because it's not usually used for shchita, it says the Mishnah, even if you find it on the 14th, you still have to tovel it because it's not presumed to be a shchita knife, and we can't assume that somebody would have toveled it specifically for the korban pesach. Now, what happens if the 14th is on Shabbos? So that means that any tevila that you do would have to have been done on the 13th because you can't tovel kalim on Shabbos. Okay, because it's kind of like a makiv patish or a tikkun kli, or however you want to put it. You can't tovel kalim on Shabbos. Except if you want to move it from a lower kedusha to a higher kedusha, so it was already tahor, but now you want to use it to eat kodshim. So now this means that If the 14th fell on Shabbos and everyone knows that you're going to be doing the shechita on Shabbos, that means people will have done their tevilah on the 13th. So therefore, if you find the knife on the 13th, then you can use it. Then you can use the knife even if you found it on the 13th, because it's presumed to have been toveled on the 13th in order to use it on the 14th. Okay. The Chamisha Asar. What happens if you find the knife on the 15th? Shochet ba'miyad. Even if you find a cleaver, you can shecht with it on the 15th, because this is now Yom Tov already, of course. So since you can't tovel kalim on Shabbos, there's a chazaka that it was already toveled before Shabbos on the 13th.
Now, what's the difference between the 14th and the 15th? They seem almost to be the same. They're saying you can.
Well, the 14th is the day when you do the Korban Pesach. The 15th is Yom Tov.
Okay. All right. I was just saying that the 14th and 15th, it was found. You could check with it immediately. So that's what I was confused with. Okay. All right.
Now, what happens if your cleaver is found tied on a string to a shechita knife? Okay, then it takes on the dealing of the sakin. We can assume that the person who, since we can presume that the knife was already toveled, nobody's going to take the knife and tovel that and leave the cleaver sticking out. So,
Right.
so the cleaver comes along for the ride. So even if you found it on the 14th, it's fine to assume that it's tahor. Okay. Mishna Dalet. Now we move on to the paroches. Now there were a lot of curtains in the mikdash, and they would actually change them over quite frequently. People would donate materials and make a new paroches, and and it would paroches shenitmeis bebladatuma. But what happened if a paroches became tamei from a secondary tumah? Okay, in other words, it's a low grade of tumah. So, for example, or a even I think it's a tumah d'rabbanan that they're talking about here. For example, if it touched a liquid that was made tamei by a sheretz, okay, so it would only be tamei midrabanan. So therefore, then you keep it inside the azara. There's no reason to take it out. It's a very low grade tumah. It's not in fact midorais. It's not even tamei. So you use one of the mikvahs that's inside the mikdash, and you bring it back in straight away, and there's no reason to. However, if it got a serious tumah, if for example a dead sheretz touched it, so it becomes a rishon tumah. Okay, so you have to take this curtain outside the azara and do the tevilah there. And they stretch it out to dry in the chel, which is the area
Right.
just outside.
Right.
Okay. And if it's a new curtain, so let me just see. There's actually one point we have. We have two toilets anyway. I think they might have had to toilets anyway, just as a preparation for the. I'm just trying to see I'm just trying to look quickly to see if a new thing had to be toveled anyway, just to remove any kind of chashasha tumah, if it had to, or if it became tamei during its manufacture. No, okay. So let's just say that it became tamei, but it was new. So if it was a new one, then they would stretch it out on the roof of some bunch of columns on the Har Bayis, so that you would be able to see it from far. Say this is beautiful manufacture, and it's an opportunity for the Am to see the things that they can't see unless they're like inside the mikdash. So they take advantage of that opportunity to stretch it out to dry there, and people can see it.
Was there any workers who could do any of the workers could do the immersion, or would have to be like the Levium or the Kohanim or this? This is really
there's no reason. I think it's not an avoida. It doesn't have to be done by Kohanim. I mean, practically speaking, you've got Kohanim in the Mikdash a lot of the time, and we'll see in the next Mishnah that it seems like it was a bunch of Kohanim who would do the Tevilah. So let's go ahead and read the next Mishnah, because we'll see more about that.
Those are the Kodesh of the of the Parochos. So
yeah, no, but it's not. But like, the only things that Kohanim have to do are things that are mitzvahs of avoda in the mikdash, right? The Kabbalah and the holacha and the zrika and
right. But also putting out the utensils, the gold, the 90 gold vessels, and all that.
Right. So I mean, there also
only
Kohanim are allowed to. Yeah, just practically speaking, places where only Kohanim are allowed to go, like into the Ulam. Only Kohanim are allowed to go.
I just froze for a second. I think you were thinking, so that's what.
Okay. Mishnah Hay. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Hasagan. Okay. Paroches Ovya Tefach. So while we're talking about the paroches, let's just give you a description of it. It was a tefach thick. And this is how that's pretty that's a thick, heavy piece of cloth. I mean that. And you can imagine how heavy it's going to be to carry this thing. But al shivim u'shtayim nimin nereges. It was made on 72 loops, right, in order to weave it. Val kol nima v'nima eshim v'arba achutin, and in each loop they had 24 threads. Orka arba im ama v'rochba eshim ama. So it was 40 amas long and 20 amas wide. Umishmonim ushtei ribo naases, and it was made from 820,000 threads. Is that right? Yes, 820,000 threads. Or so that's one of the opinions, is that it was 820,000 threads altogether. Or another opinion is that this is the amount of silver that they spent on it. In other words, 820,000 dinar.
All right.
Okay. Or the third one, so that's a different girsa in it that says that 82 women used to work on the weaving. Okay. And they would make 2 every year. They would make 2 new ones every year. In order to separate, they would replace the ones between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Interesting. Okay. And 300 Kohanim were required to do the Tevilah. Okay, so in the Bartanura explains that they this is what I was looking for. I remembered seeing this somewhere. So Bartanura explains that they would toivel the new paroches, even because even though it was completed in Tara, all the avodah was done in Tara, they still want to do a tevilah on it to initiate it for the mikdash.
They would immerse it.
Right. So they would have to immerse it, and just imagine how much water is going to get absorbed into that side.
I was just going to say how heavy it was beforehand. Now imagine with the water on it.
So that's why I say you need 300 kohanim to tovel it. So the Gemara explains that this number 300 is an exaggeration, but it's just the idea is that you had to have a lot of people getting this thing up.
I think we learned last time that either in your shir or Rabbi Luli's shir when we're doing about the base of Mikdash, that they always use 300 as an exaggeration. That it really wasn't that number. You know, it could be more, it could be less, but they did. That was the number they used. Everybody knew it was blown up, so to speak. Mm-hmm. You know, so okay.
Okay.
Right. If one consecrated his possessions, and among them was an animal suitable for the altar, either male or female, Rabbi Eliezer says the male should be sold to those needing burnt offerings, and the female should be sold to those needing peace offerings. The proceeds should be used with the rest of the property for the upkeep of the temple. Rabbi Yeshua says the males themselves should be bought in as burnt offerings, but the females should be sold to those needing peace offerings. Burnt offerings should be brought with their proceeds, and the rest of the property should be used for the upkeep of the temple. Rabbi Akiva says, I prefer Rabbi Eliezer's view over Rabbi Yeshua's view because Rabbi Eliezer applies his logical method uniformly where Rabbi Yeshua differentiates. Rabbi Papaya says, I have been taught that both views are correct. Regarding one who consecrates explicitly, the halakha is according to Rabbi Eliezer, whereas regarding one who consecrates without explicit designation, the halakha is according to Rabbi Yeshua. If one consecrated his possessions and among them were things suitable for the altar, such as wines, oils, or fowl, Rabbi Elazar says they should be sold to those needing each particular item, and their proceeds should be used for burnt offerings. The rest of the possessions should go to the upkeep of the temple. And once every 30 days, they would set the price paid for the treasury chamber. Whoever undertook to apply fine flour at 4 sah for a seller, and the price subsequently stood at only 3 selah for a seller, must supply it at 4. But if he undertook to supply it at 3 selah for a seller, and the price subsequently stood at 4, he must apply at 4, for the temple has the upper hand. Likewise, if the fine flour becomes wormy, the loss is his, and the wine soured, the loss is his. He does not receive his money until the altar atones. One more to go. No, that's right. That's it, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
Gimel Zion.
If someone is going to slaughter his Pesach offering, to circumcise his son, or dine at the betrothal feast of the house of his father-in-law, and he remembers that he has chametz at home, if he is able to return, remove it, and then return to his mitzvah, he must go back, remove it, but if not, he nullifies it in his heart. If he is on his way to save people from a marauding troop, or from a river, from bandits, from a fire, or from a collapsed building, he nullifies it in his heart. If it was but to establish a voluntary resting place, he must return at once. Similarly, if someone left Yerushalayim and remembered that he had sacrificial meat in his hand, if he had passed Sofim, and he burns it, whereas if not, if not, he must return and burn it before the temple with the wood of the altar prior. And for how much chametz of meat must they return? Meir says in either case when there is as much as a beta. Rabbi Yehuda says in either case when there's as much as an chazayas, but the sages say for sacrificial meat as much as a chazayas, but for chametz as much as a beta. One more. Where it is customary to do work on the eve of Pesach until midday, we may do work. But where it is customary not to do work, we may not do work. If one goes from where they do work until where they do not work, or from where they do not work, or from where they do not to where they do, we lay upon him the stringencies of the place which he has left and the stringencies of the place to which he has gone. But let no man deviate from local custom to avoid a conflict.
Okay, the current Gimel College.
The flute played before them until they reached the Temple Mount. When they reached the Temple Mount, even King Agrippa would take the basket on his shoulder and enter until he reached the Temple Court. When he reached the Temple Court, the Levites intoned the song, I will extol thee, O Lord, for you have raised me up and have not allowed my enemies to rejoice over me. The pigeons, which were on the baskets, were burnt offerings, and what they had in their hand, they gave to the priests. While the basket was still on a soldier, he read from, I profess this day to the Lord your God, until the end of the passage. And Rabbi Yehuda says, until a wandering Aramean was my father. Excuse me. When he reached a wandering Aramean was his father, he took down the basket from his shoulder, held it by its rim, and the priest placed his hands underneath it and waved it and read from, a wandering Aramean was my father, until the end of the passage, and placed it on the side of the altar and prostrated himself and went out.
Okay, William.
Okay, base. Concerning a pot that is full of liquids and was touched by a tevel yom, if the liquid was sorry, if the liquid was of truma, the liquid is disqualified, but the pot is tahor. If it was a liquid of chulin, everything is tahor. But if his hands were unclean, everything is tameh. This is a stringency that applies to unclean hands over a tevel yom. There is also a stringency that applies to a tevel yom over unclean hands. While an uncertainty concerning a tevel yom renders truma puzzle, an uncertainty concerning the unclean hands is considered tahor. Concerning a porridge made of truma and of garlic and oil are of kulin. They are a tevel yom touched by part of them. If he has rendered all of them puzzles, if the porridge was of chulin and the garlic and the oil were of truma, then a tevel yom touched part of them. He has rendered puzzle only the place of his touch. If the garlic was the majority, we follow the majority. When Reb Yehuda says when they formed a mass in the bowl, but if it was separated in the mortar, it is tahor, since he wants to separate. He wants a separation. And then the same applies to all pounded foods. If they were pounded with beverages, but concerning those foods that are normally pounded with beverages, if he pounded them without beverages, even if they are mass in the bowl, they're treated like a round cake or pressed egg, figs. Oh boy. Okay. One more?
Here we got Dalit here.
Yeah. If a porridge and the flake, and if the porridge and the flat cake were made of chulin, and oil of truma was floating on top of them, and the tevel yom touched the oil, he rendered puzzle only the oil. But if he stirred it, wherever the oil flowed, it is rendered puzzle. And we have
Christos.
Okay, Aleph Gimel. Some women bring an offering and it is eaten, and some bring an offering and it is not eaten, and some do not bring any offering. The following bring an offering and it is eaten. She who aborts something resembling an animal, beast, or bird, these are the words of her mayor. The comment say, however, unless it is touching, it has something of a human form. She who aborts a sandal or an amniotic sac or a fashion shell or a fetus that came out in segments. Likewise, a slave woman who aborted must bring an offering and it is eaten. Excuse me.
Because the Kohanim can't eat something that's brought to suffix.
Where's this cough coming from? The following women bring an offering, but it is not eaten. She who aborts, but it is not known why she aborted, and likewise 2 women who aborted, one of a category that is exempt and one of a category that is liable. Said Reb Yossi, when this one went east and this one went west. But if both were present together, they bring an offering and it's eaten. The following do not bring an offering. She who aborts a shell filled with water or filled with blood or filled with a varicolored substance. She who aborts something resembling fish, locusts, abominable creatures, or crawling things. She who aborts on the 40th day, or one who delivers by cesarean section. Reb Shimon declares liable one who delivers by cesarean section.
I want to just check that if somebody delivers by cesarean section, it doesn't actually say whether if somebody if a Caesar delivery, if a woman after cesarean has to bring a korban. I don't know what the halacha is actually. It's interesting because there's clearly machlokes tanaim. I don't know who we pass can like. Okay, Bava Kama Gimel Tes.
If a bull worth a mana gores a bull worth 200 and a carcass is worth nothing, he takes the bull. If the bull worth 200 gores a bull worth 200 and the carcass is worth nothing, Reb Meir said, regarding this it is said, they shall sell the live bull and divide the money of it. Reb Yehuda said to him, indeed, so is the halakha you have fulfilled. They shall sell the live bull and divide the money of it, but you have not fulfilled and also divided the dead one. Which one is that? That is a bull worth 200, and that got a bull worth 200, and the carcass is worth 50 zuz. In which case, this one takes half the live one and half the dead one, and that one takes half the live one and half the dead one. Someone is liable, sometimes one is liable for the deed of his bull and exempt from his own deed. Sometimes he is exempt from the deed of his bull and liable for his own deed. If his bull embarrassed someone, he is exempt. But if he embarrassed someone he is liable.
He embarrassed.
Right, if he right.
So if his bull walked and knocked somebody over into a puddle of mud and embarrassed him, no damage caused, but he's just like really embarrassed that he fell into the mud. Then the bull, he's not chayav for what his bull did there. But if he pushed the guy into the mud, even accidentally, and then that there's a busha there, and he can be liable for it.
If his bull blinded his slave's eye or knocked out his tooth, he's exempt. But if he blinded his slave's eye and knocked out his tooth, he's liable. If his bull wounded his father or his mother, he's liable. But if he wounded his father or mother, he's exempt.
Why? Because he's chayav misa for injuring his parents. Therefore, once he's chayav misa, then he's pater on the zikin.
If the bull ignited a stack of grain on Shabbos, he's liable. But if he ignited a stack of grain on Shabbos, he's exempt because he's liable for his life. If a bull was chasing another bull and was injured, and this one says, your bull injured it, and that one says, not so, it hurt itself on a rock, the burden of proof relies on the one who seeks to exact something from the other. If two were chasing one, this one says, your bull injured. Excuse me. And that one says, your bull injured it. Both are exempt. If both belong to one man, both are liable. If one was large and one small, and the damagee says, not so, the small one injured it. Or if one was a tam and one was a muad, and the damagee says, the muad injured it, and the damagee says, not so, the tam injured it. The burden of proof lies on the one who seeks to exact something from the other. If the injured ones were two, one large and one small, and the damagers were two, one large and one small, and the damagee says, the large one injured the large one, and the small injured the small one, and the damagee says, not so, the small one injured the large one, and the large one the small one. Or if one was a tam and one was a muad, and the damagee says, the muad injured the large one, and the tam the small one, the damagee says, not so, the tam injured the large one, and the muad the small one. The burden of proof lies on the one who seeks to exact something from the other.
Okay, that's it.
All right, great. We pretty much got through it. Just a couple of little glitches there, but that's expected. So. Okay, have a great day. Enjoy, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Be well. Thank you. Bye.